Sophie was only 9 years old when her world collapsed. Locked in her room, hugging her mother's last gift, she wouldn't eat, wouldn't speak, wouldn't live. 5 nannies tried to reach her. 5 failed, until Clara arrived. She didn't promise healing, didn't force smiles. She simply sat outside that closed door and whispered, "I came to keep you company. Sometimes we don't need words, we just need to know we're not alone." But is it possible to heal a shattered heart? And what happens when gratitude transforms into something deeper, something forbidden? Before we begin this journey that will touch your soul, I need you. If you felt that shiver of curiosity, subscribe to the channel now. Each subscription is like lighting a star in our constellation. And in the comments, write which city you're watching from. Let's create a map of hearts connected by this story. Leave your mark. Ready? Then take a deep breath, and let's begin. The rain beat persistently against the windows of the Anderson mansion that autumn afternoon. Thomas Anderson watched from the library as the drops ran down the glass, each one seeming to carry a piece of his shattered soul. It had been 3 months since Eleanor, his beloved wife, had departed, taken by a sudden aneurysm that didn't even give time for goodbyes. 3 months that seemed like an eternity frozen in time. His daughter Sophie, only 9 years old, was in her room again, always in her room. The girl who used to fill the house with crystalline laughter and invented songs had now transformed into a silent shadow. Thomas rubbed his face with his hands, feeling the weight of each wrong decision he had made. He was CEO of a multinational company, a man who moved millions with a signature, but couldn't reach his own daughter's heart. The 5th nanny had asked to resign the previous week. Like the other 4, she couldn't bear Sophie's constant rejection. The girl refused food, refused conversation, refused even to be touched. She stayed curled up in bed, hugging the teddy bear her mother had given her on her last birthday, her eyes red from crying so much, her skin pale from the lack of sun and proper nutrition. The psychologist Thomas had hired, 3 different ones, all renowned, left the meetings shaking their heads. Sophie didn't speak. She simply sat and stared at nothing, as if she had built an insurmountable wall between herself and the rest of the world. One of them suggested hospitalization. Thomas vehemently refused. He wouldn't lose his daughter too, not that way. It was Margaret, his mother, who insisted on hiring another nanny. "You need to get back to work, Thomas. The company is suffering from your absence. Sophie needs professional care," she had said, with that firm voice that accepted no contestation. Thomas hated to admit it, but she was right. The company he had built over the last 15 years was beginning to falter, and his daughter was withering before his eyes. The employment agency sent Clara Mendes's resume, 28 years old, degree in pedagogy, with specialization in child development. But it wasn't the academic qualifications that caught Thomas's attention. It was a handwritten note at the end of the resume. "I believe that each child has a unique light, and my purpose is to help them make that light shine again, even in the darkest nights." Clara arrived on a Friday morning. Thomas received her in the entrance hall, and his first impression was of genuine simplicity. She didn't wear expensive clothes or elaborate makeup. Her brown eyes had a depth that seemed to see beyond appearances, and her smile was soft, almost shy. Brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, a white blouse and jeans. Nothing in her appearance screamed for attention, but there was something about her that conveyed an inexplicable peace. "Mr. Anderson," she greeted, extending her hand. Her voice was melodious, calm. "It's an honor to be here." Thomas shook her hand, noticing it was firm but delicate. "Thank you for accepting. I should warn you that Sophie is a difficult case. The other nannies couldn't establish any bond with her." Clara nodded slowly. "Children who are going through deep grief build fortresses around their hearts. It's not that they don't want to connect, Mr. Anderson. It's that they're afraid that if they open the door again, the pain will come in along with anything good." Thomas blinked, surprised by the precision of that analysis. None of the psychologists had expressed it so clearly and understandably. "You can have experience with cases like this?" "I do," Clara answered softly. "I lost my mother when I was 10. I know exactly what it feels like to feel that the world has lost all its colors." There was a raw truth in those words that touched something in Thomas. He led Clara to the second floor, through the hallway decorated with landscape paintings that Eleanor had chosen, to Sophie's bedroom door. It was closed, as always. "Sophie?" Thomas knocked lightly. "There's someone here who would like to meet you." Silence. Clara placed her hand gently on Thomas's arm. "May I try alone?" He hesitated, but there was something in her calm confidence that made him step back. Clara waited for him to go downstairs before kneeling in front of the door. She didn't knock, didn't speak immediately. She simply stayed there, in silence, for long minutes. Then her voice emerged very low, almost a whisper. "Hello, Sophie. My name is Clara. I didn't come here to try to make you feel better, or to say that everything will be okay. I just came to sit here outside your door and keep you company. Sometimes we don't need words. We just need to know we're not alone." On the other side of the door, Sophie hugged her teddy bear tighter, another adult wanting to help, another person who was going to try to make her forget Mommy. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to block out the soft voice coming from the hallway. But Clara didn't leave. She sat there back against the door and began to hum softly. It wasn't a song Sophie knew. It was something gentle, almost like a melodious prayer without specific words, just sounds that seemed to wrap the environment in a strange calm. Sophie, despite herself, felt her tears diminish. The tightness in her chest that had been constant since Mommy departed seemed for a very brief instant to loosen just a millimeter. Clara continued there for almost 2 hours. Sometimes she hummed, sometimes she stayed silent. Eventually, she began to speak softly, as if she were talking to herself. "You know, Sophie, when my mother departed, I thought I would never be able to breathe properly again. It was as if someone had taken all the air from the world. I would lie in my room, just like you are now, and wonder why this had happened. Why me? Why her, who was so good, so loved?" Sophie, on the other side of the door, was listening now, really listening. "My father worked a lot, just like yours. He didn't know what to say, what to do, so he took me to various people, doctors, therapists, but no one understood that I didn't need answers. I just needed to feel that pain, you know? Because that pain was proof of how much I loved my mother. And part of me was afraid that if the pain went away, my love for her would too." A tear ran down Sophie's face. It was exactly that. Exactly what she felt, but couldn't express. "But then," Clara continued, her voice still low and gentle, "someone taught me something very important. They taught me that love never goes away, Sophie. Never. It transforms, but it doesn't disappear. Your mother, wherever she is now, still loves you with the same intensity. And do you know why? Because love doesn't need a physical body to exist. It's in the wind that touches your face, in the warmth of the morning sun, in the stars that shine at night. It's in every beat of your heart, because you're made of her too." Sophie sobbed softly. Clara heard it and continued, "Crying isn't weakness, dear. Crying is honest. Your tears are sacred because each one of them is a prayer your heart makes without words. And it's all okay. Cry as much as you need. I'll be here. I won't go anywhere." The sun was setting when Clara finally stood up. Her legs were stiff from sitting so long, but she didn't care. "I'm going downstairs now, Sophie, but I'll come back tomorrow if you'll let me. And I'll stay here again, as many days as you need." She went downstairs and found Thomas in the office, working on documents. He looked up, hopeful but trying not to show it. So, she heard me, Clara said simply. Tomorrow she'll hear me again, and the day after, until one day she'll open that door. Thomas wanted to believe, but he had been disappointed so many times. The other nannies also tried to talk to her. I didn't talk to her, Mr. Anderson. I talked to myself while she listened. There's a difference. When we try to make someone open up, we create pressure. But when we simply share our own vulnerability, we create permission. In the days that followed, Clara kept her promise. Every morning, she climbed the stairs with a breakfast tray, nothing elaborate, just toast, fresh fruit and natural juice, and left it in front of Sophie's door. She didn't knock insistently, she just said, "Good morning," and sat there. Sometimes she brought a book and read aloud, beautiful stories about ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges, stories about resilience, about faith, about finding meaning in pain. Other times, she talked about her day, her own memories, her own fears and hopes. Thomas watched from afar, impressed with her unwavering patience. 1 week passed, then 2. The food Clara left at the door began to be touched. First, just a few bites, then half. Eventually, the trays came back empty. In the 3rd week, on a rainy Tuesday, something changed. Clara was sitting in the hallway reading The Little Prince aloud when she heard a soft click. Sophie's door opened just a crack. Clara didn't jump for joy, didn't make sudden movements. She just continued reading, her voice maintaining the same calm, melodious tone. Through the crack, Sophie observed. This woman was different. She didn't try to break into her world, didn't pretend to understand. She simply was there, present, consistent, like an anchor in a sea of chaos. Clara finished the chapter and closed the book gently. It's a beautiful story, isn't it? About how the most important things are invisible to the eyes, about how we create bonds with people and they become unique to us. She paused. Your mother is unique to you, Sophie, and nothing in this world can change that. No one can replace her, not me, not anyone, and that's not what I'm trying to do. I just want you to know that you can be sad, you can miss her, and still one day when you're ready, you can let a little light in again. The light doesn't erase the memory of her. Actually, the light helps you see the memories more clearly. The door closed again, but Clara smiled. It was progress. That night, Thomas called Clara for a conversation in the office. He was different, lighter than in the previous weeks. The nutritionist came by today and said Sophie is eating better. She noticed my daughter has even gained a little weight. Clara smiled. She's trying. It's a slow process, but it's happening. How do you do this? Thomas asked, genuinely curious. Where does this patience come from? Clara thought for a moment before responding. When I was 12, 2 years after my mother departed, I met a lady at church, Donna Aurora. She had lost a young daughter and somehow understood my pain, even though I was just a child. She taught me that healing isn't linear. It's not a staircase you climb step by step until you reach the top and are cured. It's more like a spiral. Sometimes you go up, sometimes you go down to the same emotional place where you've been before, but each time you pass through there, you're at a different level of understanding. She also taught me about faith, Clara continued, her eyes gaining a soft glow. Not religious faith necessarily, but faith that there's a greater purpose even when we can't see it. That the difficult things we face aren't punishments, but transformations. That God, the universe, whatever name you want to give it, works through broken things. It's in the cracks that the light enters. Thomas found himself mesmerized by that way of seeing the world. Eleanor had a similar faith. She always said that everything happened for a reason, even when he disagreed with his businessman's pragmatism. But seeing his daughter wither, He had begun to question if there really was any purpose in so much pain. "Do you think there's a purpose in this?" he asked, his voice loaded with a vulnerability he rarely showed. "In Eleanor leaving so early? In Sophie suffering like this?" Clara looked at him with compassion. "I don't have answers for the whys, Mr. Anderson. No one does. But I believe we can choose what to do with our pain. We can let it destroy us, or we can let it transform us into deeper, more compassionate people, more aware of how precious each moment is. Your wife departed, and that's a tragedy that no beautiful philosophy will completely soften. But Sophie is still here. You're still here. And as long as there's life, there's the possibility of reconstruction." Thomas felt a lump in his throat. He hadn't really cried in months, staying strong for everyone around him. But something in Clara's presence made it safe to be vulnerable. "I feel like I failed her, Eleanor, for not being there when she... and now with Sophie for not knowing how to reach her." "You didn't fail," Clara said firmly. "You're human, and humans don't have all the answers, especially when it comes to loss. But the fact that you're here, trying, seeking help, not giving up even when it seems impossible, that's not failure. That's love in its purest and most persistent form." Something changed in that moment between Thomas and Clara. It wasn't romantic, not yet. It was deeper. It was recognition. Two human beings sharing the raw truth of their imperfections and pains. The next morning, when Clara went upstairs with breakfast, Sophie's door was ajar. Not completely open, but enough to be an invitation. Clara felt her heart accelerate, but maintained her calm. She pushed the door gently. Sophie was sitting on the bed, hugging her teddy bear, her eyes big and frightened, but she was looking directly at Clara. It was the first time they made real eye contact. "Good morning, Sophie," Clara said softly, entering slowly. The room was dark, curtains closed, and smelled of stale air. "I brought your breakfast. Pancakes today. I made them myself, and I should warn you I'm not the best cook in the world, but I put a lot of love into them." Sophie didn't respond, but her eyes followed Clara as she placed the tray on the little table beside the bed. Clara noticed the drawings scattered on the floor, all in dark tones, scribbles that seemed to express the girl's internal turbulence. "You draw," Clara observed, picking up one of the papers delicately. It was a female figure surrounded by black. "Your mother?" Sophie nodded, almost imperceptibly. "She seems to have been very beautiful," Clara said honestly. "You miss her." It wasn't a question, it was a statement. Sophie nodded again, and her tears began to fall silently. Clara sat on the edge of the bed, not too close, but present. "Can I tell you something Donna Aurora taught me about missing someone?" Sophie didn't respond, but she also didn't say no. She said that missing someone is love that had nowhere to go. When we love someone, and that person is with us, our love has an address. We can hug them, smile at them, do things for them. But when the person departs, our love continues to exist, but now it no longer has that physical address. And that love without an address transforms into longing. So when you miss your mother, it's not something bad. It's simply all that love you have for her, looking for a way to express itself. Sophie blinked, processing those words. No one had ever explained it like that. Everyone said, "You'll get over it," or "time heals," or "she's in a better place." But no one had validated that that suffocating pain was, actually, transformed love. "You can do something with that love," Clara continued gently. "You can write letters to her, even though she's not here to read them. You can talk to her in your prayers or thoughts. You can do things you did together as a way of honoring her. Love doesn't need to disappear just because the person is no longer here physically. She left, and I couldn't even say goodbye." Sophie finally spoke, her voice hoarse from disuse. They were the first words she had pronounced to anyone, besides murmurs, in months. Clara felt tears in her own eyes, but kept them under control. "I know, dear. I know. I also couldn't say goodbye to my mother. She had a car accident coming back from work. One moment she was there, the next she wasn't anymore, and I spent years blaming myself for not having said, 'I love you' that morning when she left the house." "You blamed yourself?" Sophie asked, surprised not to be alone in that feeling. "Very much," Clara admitted. "I thought that if I had said those words, somehow magically she wouldn't have departed, or that at least she would have taken those words with her. But Donna Aurora helped me understand something important. Our mothers knew we loved them. They knew because they felt it in every look, every hug, every moment we spent together. The last words don't define an entire relationship. All the time you spent with your mother, all the love she poured over you and that you poured over her. That's what matters." She knew, Sophie. She knew how much you loved her. Sophie began to cry more intensely now, but it was different from the silent and desperate tears from before. They were tears of release. Clara extended her arms, offering but not forcing, and Sophie threw herself into them, sobbing against her shoulder. "It's all okay," Clara murmured, stroking the girl's blonde and disheveled hair. "Cry as much as you need. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." They stayed like that for a long time. When Sophie finally calmed down, Clara took one of the tissues from the tray and gently dried her face. "How about eating a little? You don't have to eat everything, but your body needs energy." Sophie picked up a piece of pancake with trembling hands. She ate slowly, and Clara noticed she was evaluating each bite as if she were relearning to taste things. "Clara?" Sophie said softly after a few minutes. "Yes, dear? Can you stay with me today? I don't want to be alone." Clara smiled, a wave of gratitude flooding her heart. It would be an honor. They spent the entire day together. Clara opened the curtains gradually, allowing sunlight to enter little by little. She didn't force Sophie to leave the room yet, but brought life into it. She brought fresh flowers, changed the sheets, organized the toys that were scattered, and they talked. Or rather, Sophie began to open up in small fragments. She told about the last moments with her mother, about how Eleanor was making pancakes that morning, about how Sophie had complained about going to school and now hated herself for that silly complaint. Clara listened to everything without judgment, without trying to correct the girl's distorted thoughts. She just listened, validated, and when appropriate, shared her own similar experiences. When Thomas came home from work that afternoon, the change was palpable. He climbed the stairs and found Sophie's bedroom door completely open. Sunlight illuminated the space, and there was his daughter, sitting on the bed next to Clara, flipping through an illustrated book about constellations. "Daddy!" Sophie looked up, and although her smile was small and hesitant, it was there, for the first time in months. Thomas felt his legs go weak. He entered the room slowly, as if Sophie were an apparition that could disappear if he made sudden movements. "Hello, my princess." Sophie looked at Clara, seeking confirmation. Clara nodded encouragingly. Sophie then slid off the bed and walked to her father. She didn't throw herself into his arms as she used to, but stood there in front of him, her big eyes full of a mixture of emotions. "I was very angry at you," she said with brutal honesty, "because you weren't there when Mommy needed you. Because you always worked." Thomas felt as if he had taken a punch to the stomach, but knew Sophie needed to say that. "I know, and you have every right to be angry. I should have spent more time at home, should have been there." Clara said that anger is part of grief, Sophie continued, her voice still small but gaining strength. "She said I can be angry and still love you at the same time." "It's true," Thomas said, kneeling to be at her height. "And I'm angry too. At myself, mainly. but I also want you to know that your mother and I always loved you more than anything in this world, and she wouldn't want to see you suffering like this, locked in this room." Sophie thought about that. Clara said that Mommy is in the stars now, that she became part of the universe and can be everywhere at the same time. Thomas looked at Clara, who was silently observing the scene. She gave a small, encouraging smile. He returned his attention to Sophie. "Your mother always loved the stars. She used to say we were all made of stardust." "Is that true?" Sophie asked, her eyes lighting up with genuine curiosity for the first time in months. "It is," Thomas confirmed. "Scientifically proven. All the elements that form our body were created inside stars billions of years ago. So, in a sense, we're all stars too." Sophie looked at her own hands with wonder. "So I have a piece of Mommy in me, because we're both made of stars." "Exactly," Thomas said, his voice choked. "You carry her not only in your heart and your memories, but literally in your DNA, in your cells, in the very essence of what you are." Sophie finally allowed herself to hug her father. It wasn't the tight, carefree hug from before the tragedy, but it was real, genuine, a beginning. Thomas held her as if she were the most precious thing in the world, because she was. Over Sophie's head, he looked at Clara again. There were no words to express the gratitude he felt. She had done in 3 weeks what no one had accomplished in 3 months. She had brought his daughter back. That night marked a turning point. Sophie began to leave her room, first just to the hallway, then to the living room. Clara was always nearby, a safe harbor to which Sophie could return when everything became too much. Clara introduced gentle routines. In the morning, they did a small meditation together, something Clara adapted for a child, simply sitting in silence and paying attention to breathing, imagining light filling the body, gratitude for 3 simple things. Sophie was skeptical at first, but Clara explained it in a way that made sense. Our body and our mind are like a garden. If we only pay attention to the weeds, bad thoughts, painful memories, that's what will grow. But if we also water the flowers, good things, small joys, gratitude, they grow too. It doesn't mean the weeds disappear, but they no longer dominate the entire garden. They began to cook together. Clara taught Sophie simple recipes, transforming the act of preparing food into something meditative and healing. "Did your mother cook for you?" she asked while Sophie stirred cake batter. "Yes," Sophie said nostalgically. "She made the best chocolate chip cookies." "Then let's make chocolate chip cookies," Clara decided, "and while we do it, you can tell me about her. All the good memories you have, because you know what happens when we share memories. They become more alive, more colorful. They don't stay trapped just in our head, but come to life through words." And so Sophie began to talk about Eleanor, about how she sang while cooking, always off-key but full of joy, about how she created different voices for each character when reading bedtime stories, about how she believed in signs from the universe and always pointed out repeating numbers on the clock or birds in specific formations as special messages. "She seems to have been an incredible person," Clara said sincerely. "She was," Sophie agreed, and for the first time she was able to smile when remembering. Thomas watched these transformations with a mixture of admiration and an emotion he didn't dare name yet. Clara wasn't just a nanny. She was a healer of souls, and without him fully realizing it, she was healing not just Sophie, but him too. He began to arrive home earlier, delegating more tasks at work. Dinners that used to be silent and tense affairs now had conversations. Sophie, still reserved but visibly more present, talked about what she had learned with Clara during the day. Thomas shared about his work in a way Sophie could understand, and Clara asked genuine questions, interested not just politely, but truly. One night, after Sophie had gone to sleep, Thomas found Clara in the library, where she often read after finishing her duties. "You like astronomy?" he asked, noticing the book in her hands, a work about cosmology. Clara looked up, slightly surprised. "Oh, yes. It's always fascinated me. The idea that we're part of something so vast, so ancient. It puts our lives in perspective, don't you think? Our problems seem immense, but when you think you're on a planet spinning through space, part of a galaxy that's just one among billions, suddenly you realize you're part of a much bigger story." Thomas sat in the opposite armchair. Eleanor thought that way too. She used to say that each person was an entire universe, containing all the stars and planets within themselves. "She was right," Clara said softly. "And Sophie is the universe you two created together. She carries both of you inside her." "How do you always know what to say?" Thomas asked, genuinely curious. Clara gave a small smile. "I don't. Half the time I'm just trying to express things I feel but can't explain logically. Donna Aurora used to say that some truths live in the heart before they reach the head." "You talk a lot about this Donna Aurora. She must have been very special." "She was," Clara said, her eyes becoming distant for a moment. "She took me in when I was just a broken child. She taught me that being broken doesn't mean being irreparable. She showed me that there's beauty in imperfection, that the most whole people are those who went through cracks and allowed light to enter through them." Thomas found himself looking at Clara in a different way, not just as his daughter's nanny, but as an extraordinary woman who had a depth he rarely encountered. He quickly looked away, feeling guilty. Eleanor had departed only months ago. It was too early to feel whatever it was he was beginning to feel. But it was impossible to deny that her presence brought something that was missing in the house. It wasn't just that Sophie was improving, it was that the house itself seemed to breathe again. There was soft laughter, occasional music, the smell of homemade food. Clara didn't just take care of Sophie, she cared for the entire home in a way that seemed natural, effortless. The weeks turned into a month, then 2. Sophie returned to school, with Clara accompanying her the first days. The teachers were impressed with the change. The girl, who before didn't talk to anyone, now participated in classes, still quiet but present. Sophie developed a nighttime ritual with Clara. Before sleeping, they went to the garden when weather permitted, or stayed at the bedroom window, observing the stars. Clara taught Sophie about constellations, told the myths behind them, and then guided Sophie in a small prayer or intention for her mother. "Do you think Mommy can hear me?" Sophie asked one night, looking at the starry sky. "I believe so," Clara answered honestly. "Maybe not the way she heard you before with physical ears. But I believe that love creates connections that transcend the physical, that there's a part of us, some call it soul, others consciousness, that continues even after the body stops functioning. Your mother knows you're here, thinking of her, loving her. She can feel it in some way we don't completely understand." "Clara," Sophie said thoughtfully, "do you think Mommy would like you?" The question caught Clara off guard. "What do you think?" Sophie thought carefully. "I think so. I think she'd be happy that you're taking care of me, that you're helping me remember her in a good way, not just sad." Clara felt tears burn her eyes. "That's one of the most beautiful things anyone has ever said to me, Sophie." Sophie nestled against Clara. "Sometimes you remind me of her, not in the way you look, but in the way you make me feel safe, like everything will be okay, even when it's hard." "I love you, little star," Clara said softly, using the nickname that had naturally emerged between them. "I love you too," Sophie responded, and they were words she hadn't said to anyone since Eleanor's death, But not everything was simple. Margaret Anderson, Thomas's mother, visited frequently, and her opinion about Clara was clear, though not explicitly stated. She watched with critical eyes how Thomas looked at the young nanny, how Sophie clung to her. "Thomas," she said one afternoon when visiting him in his office, "Sophie is better. It's evident. But don't you think it's time to think about giving her something more permanent, a real mother figure?" Thomas frowned. "Mother, Eleanor departed only 4 months ago." "Exactly," Margaret said firmly. "Enough time to realize that Sophie needs a mother, not just a temporary nanny. And you, Thomas, need a wife." "I'm not ready to—" "Let me finish," she interrupted. "Victoria Hartwell. Do you remember her? Daughter of Charles Hartwell from the company's board. She's recently divorced, no children, excellent reputation, established family. It would be a perfect match." Thomas felt irritation grow. "Mother, I'm not in the marriage market, and I'm certainly not going to consider marriage as a business transaction." "It's not about business," Margaret insisted. "It's about Sophie. She needs stability, an appropriate family structure. That nanny, as efficient as she may be, is just an employee. She'll leave eventually. And then what? Sophie gets attached, loses another important figure? It's cruel." Margaret's words hit Thomas more than he wanted to admit. It was true that Clara was an employee. She had her own life, her own plans. Eventually she would move on, and Sophie, who was finally opening her heart again, would be hurt again. But the idea of trying to replace Eleanor, especially with someone chosen by his mother as a suitable candidate, seemed profoundly wrong. "I'll think about it," he said finally, just to end the conversation. What Thomas didn't know was that Sophie had heard part of that conversation. She was in the hallway, returning from the bathroom, when the raised voices of her father and grandmother made her stop. She didn't understand everything, but understood enough. Grandmother wanted Daddy to marry another woman, a new mother. The panic that Sophie hadn't felt in weeks returned with force. She ran to her room and closed the door, her heart racing. No, 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 no. She didn't want a new mother. No one could replace Mommy. And if Daddy got married and she had to call that woman mother? And if that woman made Clara go away? Sophie began to cry, that kind of desperate crying she thought she had overcome. Clara, who was in the laundry room folding clothes, heard the sobs and immediately ran upstairs. "Sophie, dear, what happened?" Clara entered the room and found Sophie curled up on the bed, exactly as she was months ago. "I don't want a new mother," Sophie screamed between sobs. "Grandma wants Daddy to marry someone else, and I don't want to. I don't want to." Clara sat on the bed and pulled Sophie into her arms. Hey, breathe with me. Come on, inhale. Exhale. That's it. Like that." When Sophie calmed down enough to speak, Clara asked gently, "You heard your father and grandmother talking?" Sophie nodded miserably. Hearing half conversations can be scary because we don't have the full context, Clara said calmly. "But let's talk about this, okay? First, I want you to know something very important. No one ever will replace your mother. No one can do that. Your mother is unique and will always be your mother no matter what happens. But if Daddy gets married, if your father someday, in the future, chooses to marry again," Clara said carefully, "that person would be an addition to your life, not a replacement. It would be someone new to love you, not someone to take your mother's place. Do you understand the difference?" Sophie thought about that, still clinging to Clara. "Like you." Clara blinked. "What do you mean?" "You didn't replace my mother," Sophie said, her voice becoming calmer. "But I love you too. It's different. You're different, but I still love you." Clara felt her heart squeeze. "Exactly, little star. The human heart doesn't have just one space for love. It grows. You can love your mother forever and still have room to love other people. It doesn't diminish the love for your mother. Actually, the more love you have in your life, the more you can appreciate the love you had with her. But what about you? Sophie asked in a small voice. If Daddy gets married, will you go away? Ah, so that was it. Clara held Sophie's face gently. Sophie, look at me. No matter what happens, if your father gets married, if he doesn't, if anything changes, you and I will always have a connection. Maybe I won't be your nanny anymore one day, but I can be your friend. I can be someone you can talk to, who you can visit, who will be in your life. People who really matter don't disappear just because circumstances change. You promise? I promise, Clara said with conviction. You touched my heart, Sophie Anderson, and that's not something temporary or based on a job. It's real. It's forever. Sophie finally relaxed. I don't know if I'm ready for Daddy to date someone. And that's okay, Clara assured. These things take time, and your father knows that. He won't do anything that hurts you. He loves you too much. But while Clara comforted Sophie, she herself felt a disturbance in her heart. The idea of Thomas with another woman created a strange sensation she didn't want to examine too closely. She had become too attached to that family, to Sophie, obviously, but also to Thomas, to the way he listened attentively when she spoke, how his eyes sparkled when he laughed at something she said, how he tried to be a better father. Clara shook her head mentally. No, she was the nanny. He was her employer, and he had just lost his wife. Any feelings that were emerging were inappropriate and needed to be controlled. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. The following week, Margaret organized a casual dinner at her house, inviting Thomas, Sophie, Victoria Hartwell, and, almost as an afterthought, Clara, since Sophie is so attached to her. Victoria was objectively stunning. Elegant blonde, designer dress, perfect smile. She worked at an art museum, had traveled the world, spoke 3 languages. On paper, she really was a perfect match. Sophie hated her immediately. It wasn't anything Victoria did explicitly wrong. She tried to connect with Sophie, asking questions about school, hobbies, but there was something forced, rehearsed. Victoria clearly didn't know how to talk to children. Her questions were the kind adults ask when they're fulfilling a protocol, not when they're genuinely interested. So, Sophie, do you like art? I could take you to the museum someday, Victoria offered with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I like stars, Sophie said dryly, and cooking with Clara. The discomfort at the table was palpable. Clara, sitting at the other end, tried to make herself invisible, but Margaret wouldn't allow it. Clara, dear, Margaret said, with a tone that was sweet but sharp. You must be excited. After Thomas finds an appropriate wife, you'll be able to move on with your own life, maybe start your own family. Clara forced a polite smile. I love my work with Sophie, Mrs. Anderson. I'm not in a hurry to move on. But surely a beautiful young woman like you has bigger aspirations than being a nanny, Victoria commented, and although her tone was friendly, there was a slight air of condescension. What kind of future do you imagine for yourself? Thomas watched Clara, noticing how she maintained her composure, even while being clearly put in an uncomfortable position. Clara has a degree in pedagogy with specialization in child development, he intervened. She's not just a nanny. She's a highly qualified professional who has done more for my daughter in months than any other professional managed. Victoria blinked, surprised by the vehement defense. Margaret frowned. Of course, Victoria said quickly. I didn't mean to insinuate anything. It was just a casual observation. The dinner continued tense. Sophie stayed glued to Clara the whole time, deliberately ignoring Victoria. Thomas found himself involuntarily comparing the two women. Victoria was sophisticated, polished, said all the right things. But when she laughed, it was a controlled, decorous laugh. When Clara laughed, something that happened frequently when she was with Sophie. It was a genuine and contagious sound that lit up the entire room. After dinner, while Margaret and Victoria had coffee in the living room, Thomas found Clara and Sophie in the garden, observing the stars through the telescope he had bought for Sophie the previous week. "That one there is Betelgeuse," Clara was explaining, pointing. "It's a red supergiant. One day it might explode in a supernova, and do you know what happens when stars explode?" "What?" Sophie asked, fascinated. "They create new elements and spread them throughout the universe. Elements that eventually come together to form planets, people, everything. So every explosion, every ending, is also a beginning. It's the universe reinventing itself." Thomas stood watching, hidden in the penumbra of the garden door. The way Clara taught wasn't through dry facts, but through stories, through meaning. She transformed astronomy into poetry, science into spirituality. "Clara," he called softly, revealing his presence. Both turned. "Oh, Mr. Anderson." "We didn't hear you arrive," Clara said, slightly blushing. She expected he would be inside, talking with Victoria. "Just Thomas," he said, as he had asked several times, but she still slipped into formalities when she was nervous. "Can I talk to you for a moment? Sophie, how about asking Grandma to show you the cake she made?" Sophie clearly didn't want to leave Clara, but a look from the nanny encouraged her. "It's all okay, little star. I'll be right back." When Sophie left, Thomas approached. "I'm sorry about dinner." "You don't need to apologize," Clara said quickly. "Your mother clearly wants the best for you and Sophie." "My mother wants what she thinks is best," Thomas corrected. "But it's not what I want, and it's definitely not what Sophie wants." Clara didn't know what to say to that. Victoria is okay, impressive even. But when I'm with her, I feel like I'm playing a role. The role of the widower who's ready to move on, of the CEO who needs an appropriate wife by his side at social events. Thomas paused, struggling with the words. "But when I'm here, in this house, with you and Sophie, I feel like myself. For the first time since Eleanor departed, I can breathe." Clara's heart accelerated. "Thomas, I know it's complicated," he continued, and now he was closer, close enough that she could see the nuances in his eyes. "I know it's early, that there's an employer-employee dynamic, that there are 1,000 reasons why this shouldn't, but I can't ignore what I'm feeling. And it's not just gratitude for you having helped Sophie, though I'm immensely grateful. It's you, the way you see the world, the kindness you radiate effortlessly, the depth of your convictions, your non-religious but deeply spiritual faith. Thomas, stop," Clara said softly, though her heart was beating hard. "You're vulnerable. You lost your wife, and I'm here taking care of your daughter. It's natural to develop confused feelings in a situation like this." "You think I haven't thought about that?" Thomas asked. "I spent weeks questioning myself, analyzing myself, trying to convince myself that it was exactly that, confusion, misdirected gratitude. But it's not, Clara. I know the difference." Clara closed her eyes, trying to maintain composure. "And Eleanor?" "It's only 4 months, Thomas. You need time to process your grief, not to jump into another relationship." "You're right," Thomas admitted, "and I'm not asking for something to happen now. I just needed you to know that you're not just the nanny. You're important. To me, not just to Sophie." Clara opened her eyes, and there were tears in them. "I care about you too. About both of you, very much. But precisely because of that, I need to be the sensible person here. Sophie is already confused about a possible new mother. If something happened between us and it didn't work out, she would lose you and me. I can't do that to her. I won't." Thomas nodded slowly, respecting her wisdom, even though it hurt. You're right, as always. Not always, Clara said with a small, sad smile. But in this case, yes. We need to put Sophie first. I agree, Thomas said. But when their eyes met, both knew the conversation hadn't changed what they felt. It had only established that they would act with integrity, even if it was difficult. In the weeks that followed, Thomas kept polite distance from Victoria, despite Margaret's persistent efforts. Victoria, perceiving the lack of real interest, eventually stopped answering Margaret's calls. She wasn't foolish. She had seen how Thomas looked at the nanny. Clara and Thomas kept their interactions professional but warm, never crossing lines, but always aware of the unresolved tension between them. Sophie, perceptive as children often are, noticed something but couldn't name exactly what. One day she asked directly, "Clara, do you like my daddy?" Clara, who was helping Sophie with homework, stopped. "Of course I do. He's a good man and a good father." "No," Sophie said impatiently. "I mean like. The way Mommy liked him." Clara chose her words carefully. "Sophie, your father and I are friends, and he still loves your mother very much. Is that okay?" Sophie studied Clara's face. "It would be okay, you know. If you liked him like that, I wouldn't be angry. I think Mommy would want us to be happy." Clara felt tears threaten. The wisdom of that 9-year-old child was too profound. "You're special, little star. So special." "I just don't want you to ever go away," Sophie said sincerely. "You make everything better." "I'll always be in your life," Clara promised, "no matter what happens." Autumn turned into winter. On the first anniversary of Eleanor's death, Clara helped Sophie and Thomas create a beautiful remembrance ritual. They planted a rose bush in the garden, one of Eleanor's favorite flowers. They lit candles and each shared their favorite memories. Sophie cried, but they were clean tears now, tears of longing but not despair. "I think Mommy would be proud of how strong you are," Thomas said to Sophie, hugging her. "Clara taught me that being sad is different from being broken," Sophie said. "I'm still sad sometimes, but I'm not broken." That night, after Sophie fell asleep, Clara found Thomas in the library again. It was almost as if that was their place now, where honest conversations happened. "Thank you," Thomas said simply, "for today, for everything." "It was important," Clara responded, sitting in the armchair that had become hers. Sophie needed to honor her mother's memory in a tangible way. "Have you thought about what you'll do when Sophie no longer needs a full-time nanny?" Thomas asked. Though the question hurt him, Clara had thought a lot about this. "I would like to open a support center for grieving children, a place where they can come, talk, make art, learn about spirituality and healing in a non-religious but meaningful way. Something I wish existed when I lost my mother." "That's beautiful," Thomas said sincerely. "And I would like to invest in it. Anonymously, if you prefer, not as a romantic gesture or a way to keep you here, but because it's an important cause. Eleanor would have loved this idea." Clara was touched. "You would do that?" "Yes," Thomas said without hesitation. "And more. When you're ready, you could work from here, transform part of the property into your center. Sophie could be part of it, helping other children like her. It would be therapeutic for everyone." Clara had no words. It was too generous an offer, but it also made sense. "I need to think about it. It's a lot." "No pressure," Thomas assured. "I just wanted you to know that there are options, that you don't need to choose between your mission and being in Sophie's life." It was February now, almost 7 months since Clara had arrived. Sophie was unrecognizable from the broken child she had met. She laughed frequently, had friends at school, was doing well academically. She still had difficult moments, days when the longing for her mother was overwhelming, but she had tools now to deal with these emotions. On a Saturday morning, Sophie woke up earlier than normal. She went downstairs and found Clara in the kitchen, preparing pancakes. "Clara, can I ask you something?" "Always," Clara said, turning from the stove. "Do you believe in signs, like Mommy believed?" Clara thought carefully. "I believe the universe communicates with us, yes, but I think we need to be attentive, present. The signs are there, but we only see them when we're truly looking." Sophie nodded thoughtfully. "I think Mommy sent you to us." Clara felt a chill run down her spine. "Why do you say that?" "Because last night I dreamed about her. First time I've dreamed since she departed. And you know what she said?" "What, dear?" "She said she was proud of me, that she knew you were taking care of us, and that it was okay for us to be happy, for us to move forward. She said that love doesn't end. It just changes form." Sophie paused. "Do you think it was just a dream, or was it really her?" Clara knelt to be at Sophie's height. "I think it doesn't matter. Because the message is true either way. Your mother wants you to be happy. She wants your father to be happy. And yes, she loves you and always will, but that love doesn't keep you in suffering. It frees you to live fully. So I can love Mommy and still want you to stay forever. That's not wrong." "It's not wrong at all," Clara confirmed, hugging Sophie. "Your heart has infinite space, remember? Like the universe." At that moment, Thomas appeared in the kitchen doorway. He had heard the entire conversation. His eyes met Clara's, and something passed between them, an understanding, a silent decision. Maybe it really was too early. Maybe society would judge. Maybe there were 1,000 practical reasons to wait. But there was also a simple truth. Life was short and unpredictable. Eleanor had proven that. And wasting time with what could be, especially when a child was giving her blessing, began to seem like the real tragedy. A few days later, Margaret made her usual visit. She immediately noticed something different in the air. Thomas was lighter, more present. Sophie was radiant, and Clara was too comfortable, too integrated into the family. "Thomas, we need to talk," Margaret said firmly after dinner. In the library, always the library, Margaret didn't waste time. "You're falling in love with the nanny." It wasn't a question. Thomas saw no point in denying. "Yes, this is a terrible idea," Margaret said categorically. "You're confusing gratitude with love. She's an employee, and you have completely different worlds." "We don't have different worlds," Thomas contested calmly. "We have aligned values. She understands Sophie in a way no one else understood. She makes me want to be a better man, a better father. And yes, initially it was gratitude. But it grew into something much deeper." "And Eleanor? Have you forgotten her so easily?" "Never," Thomas said, his voice loaded with emotion. "Eleanor will always have a place in my heart. But she's gone, Mother. And I know deep in my soul that she wouldn't want me to spend the rest of my life alone and unhappy. She was too generous for that." Margaret was silent for a long moment. "And if it doesn't work out? Sophie already lost her mother. If she gets attached to this woman as a mother figure and you separate, she'll lose again." "It's a risk," Thomas admitted, "but living is risking. Loving is risking, and I'd rather teach Sophie to be brave enough to love fully than teach her to protect herself so much that she never truly connects with anyone." Margaret sighed, realizing she had lost this battle. "Is she really that special?" "Yes," Thomas said without hesitation. "She is." Margaret studied her son. She had to admit, reluctantly, that she hadn't seen him this alive since before Eleanor's death. "Then I hope you know what you're doing." But there was one last obstacle, and it wasn't external. It was internal, from Clara's own heart. One night, after a particularly beautiful day, in which Sophie, Thomas and Clara had gone to the planetarium together, Clara had a moment of panic. She was beginning to feel like part of the family, and that feeling, as beautiful as it was, scared her deeply. She sought Thomas in the office. "I need to talk to you." Something in her tone alerted him. He immediately closed the laptop. "What is it?" I think I need to leave," Clara said, the words coming out rushed. "Not because I don't care, but precisely because I care too much. This is getting complicated and confusing, and I don't want Sophie to get hurt." Thomas went pale. "Clara." "I fell in love with you," she confessed, tears in her eyes, "and with Sophie, and with this life. And that terrifies me because I know what it's like to lose people. I know what it's like to love and have it torn away. And what if something happens? What if you realize it was just gratitude and not real love? What if I'm not enough to replace Eleanor?" "Stop," Thomas said, standing up and walking to her. "Breathe. You're having a panic attack and creating catastrophic scenarios." "They're not scenarios," Clara protested. "They're real possibilities." "Yes, they are," Thomas agreed, "because everything in life is uncertain. I could be hit by a car tomorrow. You could get sick. Sophie could grow up and hate both of us as a teenager. 1,000 things can go wrong. But you know what Eleanor taught me? That the only certainty we have is now, this moment. And in this moment, I love you. I love who you are, how you see the world, how you transformed my daughter, how you make me want to be better. And yes, it's scary, but the alternative, letting you go out of fear, would be much scarier." "What if I'm not enough?" Clara whispered, her deepest insecurity finally verbalized. Thomas held her face delicately. "Clara Mendes, you are more than enough. You're not replacing Eleanor. No one can do that. You're your own kind of extraordinary. And yes, I loved Eleanor with everything I had, but the heart has the capacity to love again in a different but equally deep way. You taught me that by teaching Sophie that love isn't a limited resource." Clara cried then, all the emotions she had been holding back coming out at once. Thomas held her, letting her fall apart safely. "I'm so afraid," she admitted against his chest. "Me too," he confessed, "but let's be afraid together." When Clara finally calmed down, she looked up. "And Sophie, how do we explain this to her?" "I think Sophie already knows," Thomas said with a small smile. "Children always know." And he was right. When they talked to Sophie the next day, explaining that they had feelings for each other and wanted to see if they could be a real family, Sophie simply nodded with wisdom beyond her years. "I know," she said. "You look at each other the way Mommy and Daddy looked at each other. Different, but similar too." "How do you feel about this?" Clara asked, holding Sophie's hands. Sophie thought carefully. "I'm happy, but also a little sad. Because it means Mommy really isn't coming back, you know? Like, really, really. It's not just that she departed, it's that life is continuing without her." "That's very profound and very true," Clara said softly. "And it's okay to feel happy and sad at the same time. You can be happy that the three of us are going to be a family and still miss your mother. Both feelings can exist together." "Will you be my mother now?" Sophie asked, not with resistance but with genuine curiosity. Clara and Thomas exchanged glances. Clara answered carefully, "I'll never try to be your mother, Sophie. You already have a mother, and she's irreplaceable. But I can be someone who loves you like a mother loves, who takes care of you, who's here for you. We can create our own kind of relationship, unique to us. It doesn't need to have a specific name. It just needs to be real." Sophie considered that. "Like a heart mother." "Exactly," Clara smiled. "Heart mother." "I like that," Sophie decided. Then, with characteristic child frankness, When are you getting married? Thomas laughed, surprised. Slow down, little one. First we're going to date, get to know each other better in this new context. But you will get married, right? Sophie insisted, because I don't want Clara to ever go away. Me neither, Thomas admitted, looking at Clara with a smile. But these things take time, Princess. Not too much time, Sophie negotiated. Maybe 6 months? Clara laughed, finally relaxing. Let's see how things develop, okay? No deadlines. Just letting it happen naturally. And so, a new phase began. Thomas and Clara dated in the most unusual way possible. Already living together, already taking care of a child together, already knowing each other's worst and best moments. But there was magic in it. Dinners became dates. Conversations in the library gained a different intimacy. When Thomas held Clara's hand while they watched Sophie play in the garden, it was with the certainty of someone who had found a safe harbor. Clara continued teaching Sophie about the universe, about spirituality, about how to find meaning in pain. But now Thomas participated in these conversations too, relearning to see the world with wonder through their eyes. On a starry spring night, almost a year after Clara had entered their lives, Thomas took Sophie and Clara to a special place, an observatory in the mountains that Eleanor loved. Sophie was excited, and Clara was touched by him having shared that sacred place. Under the sky full of stars, Thomas knelt. Sophie, who was in on the plan because of course Thomas had told her beforehand, held Clara's hand while her father spoke. Clara, when you entered our life, I was lost. Sophie was broken. This house was just an empty structure. You brought light, not just for Sophie, but for me too. You taught me that it's possible to honor the past and still embrace the future. That loving again isn't betrayal, but is the greatest honor I can do to Eleanor, to continue living fully as she would have wanted. You make me want to be better. You make me believe in magic again, in the kind of magic that exists in simple acts of kindness, in deep conversations, in shared looks. You're my soulmate, and I know Eleanor is smiling up there in the stars, happy that we found you. He opened a small box, revealing a simple but beautiful ring, a moonstone surrounded by small diamonds that looked like stars. Will you marry me? Will you be an official part of this weird and wonderful family we're building? Clara was crying, but they were tears of pure joy. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. Sophie screamed with joy and threw herself into both their arms. They fell on the grass laughing, a tangle of arms and happiness. Lying there looking at the sky, Sophie said, "Look, a shooting star." "Make a wish," Clara instructed. "I don't need to," Sophie said simply. "My wish already came true." Thomas pulled both closer. "Mine too." Clara looked at the stars, feeling a deep peace. "Thank you," she whispered, not clear to whom. To the universe, to God, to Eleanor, maybe to all of them. And there, under the infinite sky that had witnessed billions of years of cosmic history, 3 people found their small piece of eternity. But it wasn't just a fairy tale happy ending. It was a beginning of building a life together, of navigating the challenges that would come, of honoring memories while creating new ones. The wedding was small, intimate, close friends, some colleagues, Donna Aurora, who flew especially to be there at 82 years old, radiant to see the girl she had helped now helping others. And on the altar there were 3 photos, one of Eleanor, one of Thomas, and one of Sophie. Because that union wasn't just of 2 people, but of an entire family reconfiguring itself. Sophie was the flower girl, wearing a dress she chose herself, dark blue with small embroidered stars. She carried a bouquet of white roses for Eleanor, mixed with yellow gerberas for new beginnings. When Clara walked down the aisle, it wasn't her father, who had passed away years ago, who accompanied her, but Sophie. The girl she had helped heal was now symbolically giving her to her father, creating their new family. The vows were personal, written by themselves. Thomas promised to honor both past and present love, to be a present partner, a dedicated father. Clara promised to love Sophie as her own, to create a home full of light and learning, to honor Eleanor's memory by teaching Sophie everything she represented. But it was Sophie who made her own vows, a surprise she had prepared with Thomas. She stood in front of everyone and read from a paper, "Dear Clara, when you arrived I was very sad. I thought I would never be happy again. But you taught me that sadness and happiness can live in the same heart. You taught me about stars and the universe and how Mommy is in everything around us. You never tried to replace my mother, but you loved me in your own special way. So today, I promise to love you too. I promise not to get angry when you make me eat vegetables." Laughter from the audience. "I promise to listen to your stories about stars, even when I've heard them 1,000 times. And I promise to remember that having you doesn't mean forgetting my mother. It means my heart is big enough to have both. Welcome to the official family. You were always part of it, but now it's official. There wasn't a dry eye in the house. The reception was in the house's garden, where Eleanor's rosebush now bloomed vigorously. Clara had insisted the party be there, feeling that Eleanor should be part of the celebrations somehow. During the party, something magical happened. Sophie was dancing with Thomas when she suddenly stopped, staring at something. "Daddy, look!" A monarch butterfly, rare at that time of year, had landed on Eleanor's rosebush. It stayed there for several minutes, its wings beating softly, before flying directly towards Sophie. It circled around the girl 3 times and then landed delicately on her shoulder. Sophie stayed completely still, barely daring to breathe. The butterfly remained there for an impossible moment before flying upward toward the sky, disappearing into the sunlight. "It was her," Sophie said with absolute certainty. "It was Mommy saying she's happy for us." Thomas had tears streaming down his face. Clara, who had seen everything, simply smiled. Whether it was the universe, whether it was God, whether it was Eleanor finding a way to manifest, or whether it was just a beautiful coincidence, it didn't matter. The meaning was in what it represented for them. Margaret, who had observed everything from a distance, finally approached Clara. "I was wrong about you," she admitted. "You're not trying to replace my daughter-in-law. You're honoring her by taking such good care of her family." "Thank you," Clara said sincerely. "That means a lot." Margaret nodded. "Take care of them. They need you." "I will," Clara promised, "with everything I have." The months that followed the wedding were of adjustment, but also of profound joy. Clara continued her work with Sophie, but now also began to develop her support center for grieving children. Thomas transformed a wing of the property into a welcoming space where children could come for therapy through art, conversations about non-religious spirituality, and connection with other children going through similar experiences. Sophie, now 10 years old, became a little mentor. She shared her story with other children, showed them it was possible to continue living, continue loving, continue being happy, even carrying the pain of loss. "You never forget," she told younger children, "but you learn to carry the sadness in a way that doesn't crush you anymore. It becomes part of you, but not all of you." Donna Aurora visited again, now more fragile, but with a spirit as vibrant as ever. She watched Clara working with the children and then said, "You became what I was to you. That's how love multiplies in the universe. We pass forward what we received, transformed by our own journey." "You saved my life," Clara said, hugging the elderly woman carefully. "No," Donna Aurora corrected gently. "I just held your hand while you saved yourself, just like you did with Sophie. Just like Sophie will do with other children. It's a beautiful cycle, isn't it? Thomas watched his wife shine in this work. He reduced his hours at the company, delegated more, focused on what really mattered. Some nights he simply sat and watched Clara reading to Sophie, or the two laughing while trying a new recipe, and felt complete in a way he hadn't experienced in years. "Are you happy?" Clara asked one night, nestled against him in bed after Sophie had gone to sleep. "Immensely," Thomas responded honestly. "I never thought it would be possible to feel like this again. It's not the same as what I had with Eleanor. It's different, its own kind of beautiful." "I know," Clara said, "and it's okay to be different. Better even, because what we have is built on the truth of who we really are, scars and all." "You transformed me," Thomas said, kissing her forehead. "Made me more human, more aware, more alive." "We transformed each other," Clara corrected. "That's what true love does. It doesn't complete you as if you were incomplete before, but it elevates you, challenges you, makes you grow into better versions of yourself." On a particularly clear night, the three went to the garden with the telescope. This had become a weekly ritual, family time under the stars. Sophie, now older and more articulate, had deeper questions. "Clara, do you think there's a purpose for everything? Like, did Mommy dying have a purpose?" Clara never lied to Sophie or oversimplified. "I don't think your mother died for a purpose, dear. I think she died because of something that happened in her body, something random and cruel. But I believe we can create purpose from what happens to us. We can choose what we do with our pain. You took your pain and are using it to help other children. Your father took his pain and became more present, more aware. I found you, and you gave me a family. So the purpose wasn't in her death. The purpose is in what we chose to build after." "That makes sense," Sophie considered. "It's like her death was what happened, but our choices afterward created the meaning." "Exactly," Clara confirmed. "Meaning isn't something we find. It's something we create." Thomas listened in silence, marveled as always by the wisdom of these two women he loved. "Daddy," Sophie asked, "do you still think about Mommy?" "Every day," Thomas admitted without hesitation. "But now when I think about her, I don't just feel pain. I feel gratitude. Gratitude for the years we had, for the incredible daughter she gave me, for the lessons she taught me, and I feel that she's happy, wherever she is, seeing that we managed to find joy again." "Me too," Sophie said. "And you know what's funny? I remember her better now. When I was very sad, everything was foggy. But now I can think of specific memories, and they're clear. Like when she taught me to make bead bracelets, or when we had tickle fights on the couch, or when she sang that weird song about giraffes." They laughed together, and it was a beautiful sound, not forced, not laden with guilt, just genuine. Clara pointed to the sky. "See that star there? Sirius. It's the brightest star in the night sky, but actually it's a binary system, two stars orbiting each other. Alone, each is bright. But together they create the strongest light we can see from here. I think we're like that. Each of us has our own light, but when we come together, when we support each other, we create something even brighter." "And Mommy?" Sophie asked. "Is she still part of our system?" "Always," Thomas said firmly. "She's the star we can't physically see anymore, but whose gravity still influences us, keeps us in orbit, guides us." Sophie smiled, satisfied with that explanation. She lay down on the grass between Clara and Thomas, each of them holding one of her hands, looking at the infinite universe above. "I'm happy," Sophie declared, "not all the time, because sometimes I still miss her so much, but overall I'm happy, and I think that's okay." "More than okay," Clara said. "It's beautiful, it's human, it's perfect in its imperfection." Years passed. Sophie grew, becoming a thoughtful and compassionate teenager. Clara's support center flourished, helping hundreds of children. Thomas balanced work and family in a way he had never managed before, and together the three created a life that honored the past while fully embracing the present. When Sophie was 15, she wrote an essay for school about resilience. The last line said, "I learned that family isn't just about blood, or even about who's physically present. It's about who chooses to stay, who chooses to love, who chooses to show up day after day, even when it's hard. My mother gave me life. Clara taught me how to live it again. And both are my mothers, in different but equally important ways." The essay won a national award, but more importantly, it represented a truth she had taken years to fully understand. On a spring afternoon, when Sophie was preparing for high school graduation, she, Clara, and Thomas visited Eleanor's grave. They had developed the habit of going regularly, especially on important dates. Sophie placed fresh flowers. "Hi, Mummy. I graduated. With honors, even. Clara is proud. Daddy, too. But I know you're prouder. Because you started everything. You gave me all the foundations, all the love that made me who I am." She paused, wiping tears. "I'm going to college in the fall. I'm going to study psychology, specialization in child grief therapy." Surprise, right? Clara says it's my calling. I think she's right. I want to help children like I was. I want to be for them what Clara was for me. Not someone who makes the pain disappear, but someone who shows it's possible to carry the pain and still dance. Thomas placed his hand on his daughter's shoulder, supporting her. Clara stood a few steps back, giving them space but present. "Thank you for him," Sophie continued, looking at her father. "For raising him to be the kind of man who's not afraid to love again. And thank you for, somehow, sending Clara to us. I choose to believe you had a hand in it, that the universe answered a prayer you made before departing." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Thomas spoke. "Eleanor, our girl became incredible. She has your courage, your kindness, your faith in the goodness of people, but she also has her own strength, forged in fire, tempered by loss. You would be so proud, and I'm grateful. For you, for our years together, for Sophie, and for having taught me that love is brave enough to transform." Clara, invited by Sophie, finally approached. "Eleanor," she said softly, "I'll never try to be you. No one can. But I promise to continue honoring you by loving your family with everything I have. Thank you for having created such beautiful things. An extraordinary daughter, a husband who knows how to love deeply. You left a legacy that will continue for generations." When they left the cemetery, the sunset painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. Sophie walked between Clara and Thomas, arms intertwined with theirs. "You know what I realized," Sophie said thoughtfully. "Happiness isn't the absence of sadness, it's the ability to hold both. To be grateful for what you have while honoring what you lost. To laugh again without guilt. To love again without feeling you're betraying memories." "When did you get so wise?" Thomas asked with a smile. "I had good teachers," Sophie responded, squeezing their hands. That night, at Sophie's graduation celebration, surrounded by friends and family, Clara watched the young woman Sophie had become. She was no longer the broken child she had met. She was a whole person, deep, capable of great empathy, because she knew great pain. "You did this," Thomas whispered in Clara's ear. "We did," Clara corrected. "You, me, Sophie, Eleanor, Donna Aurora, the entire universe conspired to bring healing." "Do you believe that? That the universe conspires?" Thomas asked, genuinely curious. "I believe that when we open our hearts to possibility, when we choose to keep trying, even when it's hard, we create a magnetic field that attracts opportunities for healing, for growth, for love. So yes, in a sense, the universe conspires, but only because we allow it." Thomas pulled her closer. "I love you. You know that, right?" "I know," Clara smiled, "and I love you too. this strange and beautiful life we built. Sophie, seeing the two together, smiled. She thought of her mother, imagined her somewhere among the stars, happy, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel that familiar tightness in her chest when thinking of Eleanor. Just warmth, just love, just gratitude. Because in the end, that's what mattered. Not the duration of life, but the depth of love. Not avoiding pain, but going through it and emerging transformed. Not forgetting the past, but not being a prisoner of it. Eleanor had departed, but her love remained. In Sophie's cells, in shared memories, in the way Thomas now loved with more awareness and presence. And Clara wasn't a replacement, but an addition. A new chapter in the story of a family that learned that endings can also be beginnings. The universe continued spinning. Stars were born and died. Lives emerged and transformed. And there, in that small piece of human existence, three people found something precious. Not the perfect happiness of fairy tales, but the imperfect and very real joy of having crossed the darkest valley and chosen, despite everything, to continue walking toward the light. And when Sophie looked at the sky that night, she whispered, "Thank you for everything." And she didn't know exactly who she was thanking, her mother, God, the universe, Clara, her father. But she realized it didn't matter. Gratitude, like love, doesn't need a specific address. It just needs to be felt and expressed. And in the great tapestry of the cosmos, where billions of stories intertwine, this was just one, small, but infinitely significant. A story of loss and healing, of death and rebirth, of love that transcends all forms and limitations. A story that, in the end, reminds us that even in the darkest nights, the stars continue to shine. And when we're ready, when we open our eyes again, we can see them and recognize that we ourselves are made of the same starlight, capable of shining through any darkness. And so, under an infinite sky full of possibilities and mysteries, life continued. Imperfect, wonderful, real.